Wow, this is actually a little bit of fun. Okay, originally I wanted to give you a lecture on Vespasian, but I got to confess, the more I look at Vespasian, the more I see the Colosseum. The Colosseum is what Vespasian built when he returned from the Jewish wars, and he built it as kind of an apology to the Roman people for their previous emperor, Nero. We'll look at the activity and the extension at the end of the video, end of the lecture. Oh, Colosseum. There it is. Oh, spelling. Colosseum is Latin for beside the Colossus. Okay, it's not the same Colosseum spelling that we have in our modern day culture. So when you write the word Colosseum, sorry, my dog is barking. It is Colossus, C-O-L. But that's beside the point. Now, construction of the Colosseum. What is really cool about the Colosseum is how they put this together. It is 80 entrances around the bottom. Now, it is so confusing when you look at the Colosseum because even a lot of the websites say it's 4 stories. Now, typically 4 stories in my mind is 40 feet. It's 150 feet tall. Okay, but you do have 1, 2, 3, 4 stories. A lot of times with architecture will try to either minimize the building or maximize the building so it doesn't feel too large. When you look at this, it looks like it's a 4-story building, but then when you come up to it, all of a sudden open spaces, it's pretty amazing. Now, the next thing down there is the Manster wheel. The cranes that the Romans would use would be these cranes right here. And you put a man in that wheel, just like a hamster, or several men, and they would walk around and around and around to wind and unwind the wheel to bring materials up. Now, the building is built with brick, concrete, travertine, limestone, and marble. In one of the later pictures we'll see about the Colosseum, you'll see just a small section of seats still there. When the Romans collapsed, the Colosseum was seen as a quarry. People would come and rip things out. They would take it so they could take it back to their house, have a nice statue, have marble steps. They recycled it, essentially. And so a lot of the Colosseum was ripped away, and then an earthquake damaged the south side of the building. Now, the Colosseum structurally, all it is a series of arches. We didn't go through the arch yet. I'm not sure if we'll get to. I'll see, because the next 3 or 4 lectures are going to be focused on construction and the people who built. But an arch is where you have 2 pillars, boom, and then they are connected with this arch. And at the very top of the arch, it's called the keystone. It's a wedge-shaped block that holds the weight or pushes the weight down to those 2 columns. But if you look at the Colosseum, there are arches. So you see this arch here? Okay, and that's just a donut-shaped arch that goes around the Colosseum. Same with all those arches. Okay, and then you have other arches that go this direction or into the building. And so all it is columns and arches. Pretty fascinating to look at and to think about when they built it, how they came up with that. Now, the Colosseum is located just east of the Palatine Hill. The Palatine Hill is a traditional palace hill of the Caesars, right up here. And also the Forum. Now, the Forum runs right through here. I think that's the Temple of Apollo. I think that's the Arch of Constantine. There's some basilicas in here. Very cool to walk down there. The very first night I ever went to Rome with my wife, we were staying in a hotel about a mile that way, about a mile east of this location. But we saw the Colosseum on our walk from the train to our hotel, and so we came back to it at night. It was lit up. It was super cool because we got to walk down through some of those old 2,000-year-old streets. Then we had to walk down the regular street to the Colosseum. Next day, we did come through the Forum and we toured it, but it's lovely. Now, if you remember the lecture on Nero, okay, he built the Domus Aurea. And this part right here was his swimming pool, his lake, a 6-acre lake that he built there. Nero had miles of walkways that were covered because he didn't want to walk in the sunshine. And so when Vespasian returned from the Jewish wars, he wanted to be more of a populist type principate or emperor. And so he built this Colosseum, drained the lake, built this Colosseum over where the lake was. He left the plumbing in, and we'll talk about that in a little bit too. But left the plumbing in, drained the lake, built this Colosseum kind of as a gift for the people. Now, back when we were looking at Julius Caesar in the first triumvirate, we were talking about the dole. People would get a dole of daily bread, and that was still happening. Okay, it happened for quite a while. I'm not sure when it ended. If it did end, I have to look that up. But there's a saying of bread, the dole, and circuses, the games. The Colosseum is the games. And a lot of these emperors, these leaders, would give bread and games to keep their people entertained and fed. People who came to the games didn't have to pay, they were free. So you could walk right in. Now we'll get to it here. Oh, it's coming up. But I did want to mention too, this is the south side of the Colosseum. It did collapse in the Middle Ages when they had a big earthquake. I kind of like the architecture of it now with this half dome or half arc here. Looks very interesting. Now, the dimensions of the Colosseum, 620 by 513 feet. I did mention the seats that were still left. Right in this section here, you still have some of those marble seats. Now, when I went to the Colosseum, my wife and I went down to those marble seats, and it's fascinating because in the seats, you do have some divots where soldiers or people would play games with bones, like dice. And so you have these smoothed out divots where people would play their games. This Colosseum is not the only Colosseum. Maybe, I'm not sure if we'll look at Pompeii, but if we look at Pompeii, they have a small Colosseum. In fact, the word arena means sand. Sand is what the people would fight on, the gladiators would fight on because it would soak up the blood. And so the arena was their arena. And the Colosseum is just this double amphitheater that's put together, two half circles. Now they had Colosseums all over the Roman Empire, but this is the biggest one. It would sit about 50,000 people around. Now you would be divided by social classes. I think, okay, one side would sit the emperor, the other side would sit the Vestal Virgins. These are the women priestesses who were supposed to keep the fires of Rome burning. And then as you moved up, you'd have poor people at the very top level. They had these wooden bleachers for the very, very poor people and women. Okay, so they get up top. Now, another thing to remember is the Colosseum was built with slave labor. One site I saw said about 100,000 slaves were used to build the Colosseum. A lot of these slaves would have been the Jews captured during the Jewish War. And so it's just fascinating to look at this and to think about the lives that went into it. Now, when they did dedicate the Colosseum, it was also not called the Colosseum back then. It's called the Flavian Amphitheater. And I need to write that down for you. I'll put that on the slideshow later. But the Flavian Amphitheater, after Vespasian, the family. Now, this is so cool too. The floor of the Colosseum is called the Hypogeum. And it was a floor. This is a wooden floor. They were actually building this when my wife and I went there. They're working on it. So you could see where the level used to be. Now, before they built this, I think they built this floor about 20 years, or a floor like this, about 20 years after the amphitheater opened, because the original level used to be about 20 feet lower than this floor. But then they remodeled it, and they remodeled it to make it a more exciting game, because this floor would be full of trapdoors. You'd have elevators. you would store animals and gladiators down beneath. And so in the games, you'd all of a sudden pop an animal up, pop a gladiator up, make things more exciting. You might have seen something like this in the Hunger Games, in the Game Makers. Okay, if the game is getting too dull, you've got to introduce those killer bees. What are they called? Flapperjacks. I'm not even sure what they're called anymore. But you'd introduce different animals, different fires to make the people get together and fight. In fact, the entire Hunger Games series is kind of a look at ancient Rome. So when you read that, keep that in mind. Another thing they had was the Velarium. In previous pictures on this slide, you can see these little steps on the side of the Colosseum. They would house these poles that would stand up, and they would tie all these ropes together so you could bring this vellum over the top of the arena to cool the people. So this was an amazing stadium. Now, when you look at this stadium compared to others, okay, Martin Stadium holds about 30,000 people, so it's, 40% bigger than Martin Stadium. Let's see, there are my sources. And when we look at what you need to do, okay, after watching this, create a poster, advertise the Colosseum. When the Colosseum opened, they had 100 days of games. Typically, they would, it's really nasty. I don't want to get into all the blood and guts, but you essentially have animal fights in the morning, execute prisoners, and then in the late afternoon, you'd have the gladiator fights. Okay, and gladiators were expensive, so they didn't always die. A lot of times, I forget what the percentage is, but it was like 15 to 20% of the gladiators would be killed, which is a lot, but not 100% or 95. So create a quick poster. You'll need to take a picture of it and send it to me, advertising the Colosseum. Okay, you could also do it on a document and just add a lot of pictures and text and stuff. Or now the extension is, how is Vespasian different from Nero? Are they different? Do they just have different skills? Write a short newspaper article from the beginning of Vespasian's reign that shows how the emperor Vespasian will be different from the previous emperor, Nero. You guys are awesome. Hope everything's going well. And email me if you have any questions. I'll talk to you guys later.